Hi, this is Jason with Fotified, and today we're going to answer some email questions. So this is going to be a multi-part series. I'll cut this up into little chunks so you guys can select what you want to watch. I'm going to talk about the light stick that I use and how I set it up. I'm going to talk about HSS with the TT850s. I'm also going to talk about it with the Flashpoint RL600B over here. And I'm going to use the A6000 to show you that. I'm not going to go in depth on crazy settings because in the field things change a lot. But I will kind of show you what to shut off in your camera and what you don't want to use when you're using HSS with the Sony system with the Opas triggers. So I'm going to talk about the adapters I use to get it to work also. So first question though was about the beauty dish, and I'm just going to answer it really quickly. I use a 16-inch beauty dish instead of a 22-inch beauty dish. The reason why is because it's more portable. The light difference from a 22-inch to a 16-inch is not that different. It's so marginal to me. This is a little bit more of a kind of harsher light, but in the wind it's better than an umbrella, and it's better than like a 24-inch softbox and so forth. So in the weather it's great, and I live in Tacoma over in University Place, and it rains quite a bit here over in the Pacific Northwest. So I use this all the time, and what I do is over the Flashpoint RL600B, I take a little mini trash bag for your bathroom, and I put it over the top, and I tape it around this ring right here on the beauty dish itself, so I can use it in the weather and not get my flash wet or the tube inside wet. Now, a lot of people have talked about hypersync, and you know, are you sure it works? No, you're not doing a hypersync, you're doing a super sync, or it only works if I use it at full power. I can get the camera to sync faster. And really the thing is this. With the A6000, I can get it to sync to 200 sometimes, depending on the mood of the wireless trigger and the flash. But really, Sony recommends that you shoot at 1/60th of a second for this camera. But you can get it to work. This is without hypersyncing. With hypersyncing, you can get up to 1/8000th of a second. How that is done is I'm using the Opas for Sony Transceiver. The Transceiver, and it does everything that you need. Now you're going to need 2 of these to make it work. So, and how I have it set up is this. Okay. I have the Sony Minolta, the old Minolta mount, to the Sony multi-interface shoe mount. Now, I'll put this in the description below what the actual model is. It's the ADPMAA. So that's the model number. And what I do, since the Opuses still use the Minolta mount, is I just put that on and I lock it, and it just stays on there, and I put it with the case. So this is going to go on top of your camera. Okay. Now, I want to say some things about this, is that make sure it's on fairly tight. Now, you're going to want to turn on the trigger first and then turn on your camera. Okay, that way the camera can see it. Sometimes the camera does not see it, and you need to reset or basically turn off the trigger and turn it back on sometimes. Now, basically, I go and I make sure that my flash mode is on wireless. So you got to make sure that your flash mode is on wireless, or this is not going to work. This goes with any trigger system with Sony, and usually most cameras are the same way. So now that we have that set up, okay, what I do is on the TT850, okay, I have another adapter, And this is the HSA CSC. It's made by Vello, okay? Now, I put this on the top here of the transceiver, and then I put that, okay, on top of this. And I turn it on. So this would go on your tripod and be mounted like that, just like any other standard receiver or TTL system. Okay, so you would just put it on your pole. Now, inside your camera, or sorry, inside your flash, all right, you're gonna wanna turn that on, and you're gonna want to hold down the HSS button, just hold it down, and it'll have an H with a little arrow pointing down, a little kind of thunderstrike arrow. Okay, now we're in hypersync mode, okay? So now, if I go to 1/4 power, and I, let's say, turn it on here, and make sure the trigger's turned on, make sure we're receiving, make sure this one is transmitting. Now we have HSS, and if I bring up my shutter speed to 1/4000th of a second, take a shot, I get flash. So this is how it works. Okay, you got the Opas for Sony transceiver with the Sony Minolta to multi-interface adapter that goes on top of the camera. Okay, and then you have the Opas for Sony transceiver with the Minolta to standard interface shoe or standard shoe adapter, okay, which is more of like what Canon and Nikon use. Now, it doesn't mean that you can use your standard Nikon and Canon flashes with this in a sense and get hypersync. I'm not really sure on that. I haven't tried it, so I don't know, and that's just something I can't answer. So, yeah, that's how it works, and it works great. So, yeah, that's HSS, and that's how I get it to work. In the Sony a7 II, you want to make sure that the electronic shutter is off. You want it just like the old school way of shooting, because you'll get little lines coming down, because you'll actually see the HSS flutter of the flash. Because how HSS works is this flash is basically strobing thousandths of a time a second. So when the shutter comes down, the light is going inside of the sensor as the shutter's coming down each time. That's how HSS works. So you need to turn off the electronic shutter, or you're going to have these lines coming across. You will see them in the shadows more than anything. You will not see them in the highlights. I have made this mistake many times, and even in weddings. But you just gotta make sure you shut that off. And the Sony a6000, same thing. So you'll have to look in your manual, look in your menus, and find that, because the menus are so convoluted in the Sonys. So that's HSS. Now, you could also, all right, you could take a jack and jack it into your sink here, and then jack it into the sink of this as well. You're going to have to get a 3.5 millimeter to a smaller, I think it's a 2.5 jack, to go into the TT850 for that to work. I think the easiest way is to just put it on like this and just have it hang in there like that. So that works great. Now, you could do this too. You could take your trigger, okay, because you could still use your trigger and bring up the power up and down for the TT850. Now, you could put the trigger right here and have this trigger talk to this trigger, which tells this trigger to turn this trigger on. Now, you could actually gain distance with that. So you could have this trigger kind of sit on the ground in between your subject if you were doing something really far away, and you could actually, in a sense, rebound, kind of use this trigger as a booster to boost the signal for this. You could do that. But this is another way you can do it, is basically, we'll turn this on, and we'll put this on channel A, make sure that this is on channel A, and, or sorry, group A, and make sure this is on channel 1. So now we're talking to this with the flash, and if I turn this on, let's see what we got. And there we go. And I'm actually getting exposure and everything is clean. So I'm shooting at 1/4000th of a second. At ISO 800 or whatever, I can go down to 2 or 100, doesn't really matter. And there we go, I'm getting exposure. So you can do that. I'm just letting you know that you can hop from this receiver to this receiver to this receiver to that receiver and make it work. So that's HSS, and this works the same way with A7 II. There's no difference. It's the same gig. So yes, the Opas triggers for Sony they're cheap too, and you don't have to spend a lot, and they're pretty good. I'm pretty happy with them. So cool. So that's about HSS. In the next video, we'll talk about how I use it with the Flashpoint, the RL600B.